Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing alright. Today I have another full flight video for you guys. In the previous video we flew the Toliss A321 to Frankfurt, and today we are flying its little sister, the Airbus A319, also from Toliss. The flight takes us to Innsbruck in Austria, which has one of my favorite approaches. I'm of course talking about the visual approach for runway 08. It's a pretty challenging approach to fly, especially during the final turn towards the runway, when you need to keep an eye on your altitude, speed, turn rate, and everything else at the same time. So it requires some skill and experience. I definitely wouldn't recommend it to anyone who's new to Flight Simulator. Anyway, we are flying with Austrian Airlines today and we are departing from London Stansted Airport. We are currently parked at stand 11. The flight number of today's flight is Oscar Sierra 2586, and the flight time should be about 1 hour and 30 minutes according to SimBrief. Now, currently in Belgium here, we are in the middle of a heat wave, so it's very warm in here, and I've turned on my blower next to my desk, so you might hear some very faint background noise, but it's really necessary because otherwise it would be unbearably hot in the room where I do Flight Simulator. So without further ado, let's jump into the cockpit. Here we are guys inside the cockpit of the A319. As you can see, it's exactly the same as the A321, only the exterior of the airplane is much smaller than the A321. So we are going to start the airplane by pressing the external power button. And we're also going to turn on the two main batteries. Then to the adheres, they can all go to nav. Nav and logo light can go on. Seatbelt and no smoking signs can go on. Emergency exit lights can be armed. We don't need the dome light, and I'm gonna turn up the brightness of the integrated lights. Backflow can just go to normal. I'm immediately going to go to the FMC and to the init page. So like I said, we are at London Stansted, which is EGSS, and we're going to Innsbruck, which is Lowy, line IRS. The flight number is, I forgot for a second, Oscar Sierra 2586. There we go, the cost index is 19, and we are cruising initially at flight level 350, but we will do a step climb probably later on in the flight. So the block fuel is 6.8, so 6 tons and 800 kilograms of fuel for today's flight. And we need to have a zero fuel weight of 57.4, like so. Now we have the initial fuel prediction for the flight. So now we can turn up the brightness of the rest of the displays, just like in the A321. There we go. Now I'm going to do the loading performance right here. So like I said, 6.8 tons of fuel. There we go. We are taking 145 passengers today. Quite a full flight. Actually, it's completely full. And the zero fuel weight needs to go down to 57.4. We'll distribute to load evenly. There we go. So now the airplane is filled up with passengers and fuel. We can now go to the flight plan. Departure, we are departing from runway 22 on the CLN-1E departure. No transition, and we can insert that. And from CLN, we are going to fly via the M84 airway. And we are taking that to Conan. From there, we are taking the UL 607 airway all the way up to Amazi. From there, the UM 149 airway to Bombi. Then the T104 airway to Whiskey Lima Delta. Then another airway, this time the M867 airway. And we're taking that one to Bavax. Insert, now we need to go to the last waypoint. From there we are again going to follow an airway to Manal. And then finally one more airway, the M736. And we're taking that to Toliss, which is the first waypoint of the arrival. So now we're going to go to the arrival page. We are initially going to fly the localizer approach for runway 26 on the Toliss 3A arrival. This one right here. From Romeo Tango Tango. No transition. So initially we're going to fly the localizer for runway 26, but right before the runway we are going to join the visual approach for runway 08. That's the flight plan. We can check that everything is as it's supposed to be. That all looks correct. So now we have still 4 minutes until the IRS have aligned, so we can turn on the master for the APU. And we'll wait for the flap open message to pop up. There it is. Now we can push the start switch and the APU will start itself up. In the meantime, we'll take a listen to the ATIS report at the airports. According to the Navigraph charts, the frequency should be 127.180. Which is apparently not up to date. Or I should say X-Plane 11 is not up to date because the Navigraph charts are updated regularly. But you know, we can always cheat using the map. So it's not 180, but it's 175.
London stands
there we go.
Information Oscar. 1200 Zulu weather. Wind 080 at 10. Visibility 10. Sky clear. Temperature 28, dew point 19. Altimeter 2994. Arriving runway 04. Departing runway 04. Advise on initial contact you have Oscar.
Okay, so apparently they are taking off at the opposite runway, but I'm not really going to change that, it's not that important.
London Stansted information Oscar. 1200 Zulu weather.
Okay, so the wind is 080 at 10, I believe, so I'm just going to put that here as a reminder. The APU has started up now, so I'm gonna turn on the APU bleed and disconnect the external power. Now that that's done, I'm going to do the performance calculations using the Toliss screen. We are departing today with flaps 1, so 1 slash up 0.2. The flex temperature is 62, and that gives us a V1 of 145, VR of 148, and a V2 of 151. Transition altitude at 0.6,000 feet. So that's set, the flight plan is set. Now we can do the departure briefing and also the taxi briefing. So here we have the chart for the parking stands at Stansted. We are departing via runway 22, so that's this runway right here. We are going to push back with our nose to the left and tail to the right. And once the pushback is done, we are going to go straight ahead to taxiway Alpha, make a right onto Hotel, and then a left onto Romeo. And we're gonna hold short of runway 22. Then after departure, we're going to fly a runway heading of 223 until we are at this waypoint right here, where we need to be above 900 feet and below 4000 feet at a maximum of 210 knots. After that, we are going to make a left turn to this waypoint where we need to still be below or at 210 knots. Then to this waypoint, same speed restriction. Then to the next waypoint where we need to be above 3000 and below 4000 feet. And then we can accelerate to 250 knots. And then it seems our initial altitude is 6000 feet until Clacton. And we are not allowed to do any turns below 850 feet, so that's pretty much everything we need to know about the departure briefing. Oh, what am I doing? Oh, as you can see, the IRSs have finished aligning. So all we need to do here is set the initial altitude of 6000 feet, like so. And I think we are pretty much ready to go. So we'll start the pushback.
Ground to cockpit. Please show me where you want to go.
I want to go right over here.
Ground to cockpit. Tow is driving up.
There we have our pushback truck. He'll just drive through all of the buildings. Very realistic. All the fuel pumps can go on now. And we'll turn on the beacon light momentarily. Everything else is good to go for now.
Okay, all doors and hatches are closed. Ready to connect.
So beacon light can go on.
Tow connected and bypass pin inserted. Release parking brake.
Parking brake released. We can turn on the ignition.
Starting pushback and you may start engines.
We'll wait with starting the engines until we're a bit further from the gate. This should be quite enough distance. Starting with engine number 2. As you can see, the N2 percentage is already rising. Oil pressure and temperature are all in the green. N1 and EGT are rising as well. So there we go, we have one good engine, let's make it 2. That's the PTU barking away.
Operation complete. Set parking brake.
Parking brake is set.
Disconnecting tow. Stand by.
Now we have 2 good engines, so back to the overhead panel. APU bleeds off and APU off as well. Notify the flight attendants. Auto brake to max, flaps to 1. Transponder to TARA. Ignition back to normal, spoilers armed. And finally we can press the takeoff config button. Then the last thing we need to do is the flight control check. Flight controls are free and correct. Back to the wheel
Tow is
page.
disconnected and bypass pin has been removed. Hand signal on the right. We'll see you next time and have a safe flight.
He will now show us our gear pin, and then we are good to go. There we go. Taxi light on, so we don't collide with any other airplanes or airport staff. There's Romeo. So here we are. Strobe light can go on, runway turn-off lights and landing lights can go on. Taxi light to takeoff. We'll notify the flight attendants one more time now. One final check to see that everything is where it should be. Weather radar can go on now, and I'll tilt it at 5 degrees. Everything else is good, altimeters are set. We are good to go, guys. Check for any incoming traffic and also outgoing traffic. There is none. Runway 22 is identified. Okay, so wind is 080 at 10, so slight left crosswind, forward pressure on the yoke. Here we go, guys, enjoy. V1, rotate. Pass the freight, gear up. So autopilot 1 can go on. Our first altitude restriction is 4,000 feet. And there we have the airport. So the airplane is accelerating now to 250 knots. Flaps can go back to 0. And we can probably cancel these altitude restrictions now. There we go, all the restrictions have been cleared. MCP altitude is now flight level 350. Or there's still one altitude restriction. There we go, now they are all gone. Welcome back, guys. We have reached our cruising altitude of flight level 350. We are currently 22 minutes into the flight and are flying over my home country, Belgium. And this here is the coast of Belgium, and down there, I believe that's the airport of Ostende. That's pretty nice. Like I said in the beginning of the video, we are currently in the middle of a heat wave. So it's very warm here in Belgium, and probably also the Netherlands over there. I'm probably going to edit the video right here, so I will see you guys back at the top of descent, which is still 343 nautical miles away from us. I will see you then. For now, enjoy the views. So guys, welcome back. We still have 37 nautical miles to run until the top of descent. And as you can see, the aircraft has requested that we enter the destination data. So we'll do that right now. First though, I need to look up the altimeter at Innsbruck. So the altimeter at Innsbruck airport is 29.94 with a temperature of 32 degrees. It's quite warm there. And the wind is 80 at 7. Our minimum descent altitude will be, let's see here, it will be 3,700 feet. And our landing speed will be 132 knots with an approach speed of 137 knots. So in the MCP I will set 3,700 feet as our final altitude. Like so. Still 19 nautical miles until the top of descent. I'm gonna turn on the fasten seatbelt sign again. And once we've started the descent, we will do the arrival and approach briefing as well. There we go, we have reached our top of descent, so I'm going to press the altitude knob. Apparently we are already above the descent profile, but that's no problem because the airplane will just adjust its descent rate to intercept it. As you can see, the descent profile is already coming closer now. While the airplane is doing the descent, we can now brief the approach and arrival. We'll start with the arrival. We are flying the Toliss A319 arrival. So it is a very short arrival, just 2 waypoints. And at both of them we need to be above 9,500 feet. And after Rattenberg, we are going to fly the localizer from runway 26, which is this approach right here. So we're going to fly to Adwig, where we need to be at or above 9,500 feet. After that we are going to descend to 3,700 feet. And then we will fly the visual approach for runway 08. Transition level is by ATC, so we'll just switch to the local altimeter setting somewhere around Adwig or RTT. So this here then is the visual approach chart for Innsbruck. At a distance of 4.2 nautical miles from the localizer DME, we will start turn towards 230 degrees. Now it doesn't say how far you need to go to the mountains, but we'll use the terrain radar for that in the Airbus itself. So we are going to fly right past the mountains until a distance of 3.5 nautical miles, again from the localizer DME. After that we are going to start a gradual descent and a quite steep turn towards the runway, because there's not a lot of room between these two mountains. And if everything goes well, we'll end up right in front of the airport, or runway I should say, and perfectly on the glide slope. Now in real life the pilots would look out for a church that is approximately at the turning point, but I don't think it's modeled in X-plane level, so we'll just use the distance measuring equipment in the aircraft instead. We're gonna use auto brake medium for today, which is the highest setting you can use. You can also already see the approach on the navigation display there. There's runway 26. So the airplane is now approaching the Rattenberg VOR. We are passing 11,000 feet, and we should make sure the airplane doesn't go below flight level 095, because as you can see we are surrounded by mountains, and if we go below the safe altitude we will be a bit too close to the mountains, which is obviously not safe. I've also turned on the terrain radar to help us during the approach. And the aircraft is now decelerating. Can turn on the landing lights as we are passing 10,000 feet. And there's the right turn towards Adwig. The airport is somewhere over there. I'm just going to turn on the landing system as a visual guiding tool. I'm not actually going to engage approach because it might be difficult to get out of the mode once we want to start the visual approach. You can zoom in a little bit on the navigation display. You can also already see the airport over there. You can see the terminal, which is quite bright from over here. So I've just set the speed to 220 knots because there's no need to decelerate any further, because we're still quite a distance from the airport. We are, however, going to start extending the flaps and the landing gear pretty soon, so we can fully focus on not flying into the mountain, obviously, and the visual approach. So the airplane is now making its turn towards the runway. And once we've passed the mountains over here, the airplane will start descending as well. There we go, the airplane is now descending. Are pretty close to the mountains, but that's alright. That's how close we are to the mountains.
Terrain.
Yeah, I know.
Terrain.
We might have to use some speed brake here. And this is the DME reading that we're going to use during the visual approach. So this needs to be 4.2, and then after that we'll make the left turn to 230 degrees. So, if I remember correctly, the altimeter is 2994, which is correct. I'm gonna extend the first notch of flaps. You can see the slats are being extended now. And that's how close we are to the mountains, folks. We might have to switch to heading modes in a moment. Okay, I'm really going to start extending the flaps now. We are going to use some speed brakes because the air, and we're going to extend the gear already. Because the aircraft is having quite some trouble slowing down, it seems. Okay, so we all also need to make the turn now towards 230 degrees.
2000.
Make sure the airplane stays at 3,700 feet. Okay, there we go. Everything's looking good so far. Here we have the airport. And we'll extend the final notch of flaps. Nice and early. So our next turn will be towards 264 degrees. Right about now, I think. I'm going to disengage the autopilot now and fly manually. So we're gonna keep an eye on the DME reading again. I'm also going to turn off the flight director to make it a little bit easier. So at 3.5 nautical miles we'll make the final turn. So around here somewhere there would be a church normally in real life. Okay, there we go. We'll start the right turn now and also a gradual descent. And this right here is the tricky part. So we'll make sure we don't descend too low and maintain a 30-degree turn.
1000.
Terrain.
Disregard that.
Full terrain. Terrain.
And there's the airport right there.
Terrain.
We overshot it a little bit, but that's okay.
Terrain.
Yeah, we're a little bit too high on the glide slope. There we go. You mostly have a headwind, but also a slight crosswind from the right, so we'll keep an eye on that.
500.
Checked.
400. 300. 200. 300.
100, 50, 40, 30, 20, retard, 10, 5.
We floated quite a lot there. We are down. I had to switch to manual braking there because I wasn't sure we would be able to stop. But luckily we didn't overrun the runway, so that's good. So here we are, guys. After 1 hour and 36 minutes, approximately 6 minutes overtime, we arrived at our destination at Innsbruck airport. So I'm already going to start the APU. Landing lights and strobe lights and everything can go off. Transponder can go to alt report off. Okay, taxi light can go off now because we're at the terminal, and we'll park right over there. There we go. APU is available, APU bleed can go on, and the engines can be turned off. So guys, once again, welcome to Innsbruck. I'm gonna leave the brake fan on because, as you can see, one of the wheels is pretty hot. Fasten seatbelt sign and beacon lights can go off. All of the fuel pumps can be turned off. And everything else is where it's supposed to be. So guys, let's look at a couple of replays of this quite floaty landing. So there we go, guys. Not really my best landing. I mean, it was kind of floaty, and at an airport like this with such a short runway, you can't really afford to float. And besides that, it was also not a very soft landing, but you know, practice makes perfect, right? So anyway guys, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel, as it really helps make my channel grow and reach more people in the aviation community. Comments or questions regarding the video or aviation in general are always welcome in the comment section below. And definitely go check out some of my other content. So yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. See ya.